What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another video. Week 2 is almost in the books. We still have two Monday night games, the Carolina Panthers and New Orleans Saints, and the Cleveland Browns and Pittsburgh Steelers. So still some pretty notable fantasy options playing tonight, but the waivers have to come out. So today we're going to talk about our Week 3 waivers. Week 2 was very interesting because the touchdowns were crazy. We had shootouts left and right. In Week 1, most of my teams in our fantasy league hardly even broke 100 points in like a half PPR league. And this week, nearly every team was almost above 100 or pretty close to it. So there's a lot of touchdowns in Week 2. But here in Week 3, let's talk about some players from the running backs to receivers to tight ends to even quarterbacks that I am really eyeing up for waivers this week. So let's just start with the running backs. We'll talk about quarterbacks later in the video. The first set of guys I want to talk about are running backs. It's Kyren Williams, first off, right off the rip. These are guys where they're highly owned in leagues, but they're not owned everywhere. Kyren Williams, when I looked on Sleeper, that's where I'm getting all of my owners percentages is from Sleeper. Kyren Williams is 63% owned. 63. That's too low. He's the starting running back for the Rams. Cam Akers was a healthy scratch in Week 2. That's unbelievable luck. If you listened to me in Week 1, you went out and Kyren Williams was your number one waiver ad. I said it in the first week video. Kyren Williams was my number one ad. I spent, out of $100 in Fab budget, if you use Fab, I spent $35 on him, which might be a lot. I know it could have been stupid, but I really think this is going to pan out season long if he stays healthy. He's getting the majority of the workload. He's proven that he's done pretty well in the two games that he's gotten the work. He's been good. He scored 2 touchdowns last week. So Kyren Williams to me is just easily, if he's still available in your league and you have a fab budget or a waiver, if you're top claim on the waiver wire, take him. Put a claim in, get Kyren Williams. Because unlike the next guy I'm going to talk about, which is Zach Moss, Jonathan Taylor might come back, where Zach Moss might not be useful in 2 more weeks. Kyren Williams has season-long upside. So let's go on to the next guy in Zach Moss. He's 55% owned. I didn't have him on the Week 2 waiver, I should say. I keep saying week 1, but the Week 2 waiver wire show, because I didn't think he was going to get all the touches like this. I mean, I don't think another running back got a carry in that game outside of Zach Moss. He's 55% owned, and last week, 18 attempts, 88 yards, and a touchdown. That's another guy where if you have Saquon Barkley, where you don't know, we think it's an ankle injury, so he might be out for a few weeks. If you need a guy that can buy you some time until you do get your Jonathan Taylor back, your Austin Eckler back, your Saquon Barkley back into the lineup, guys who I think we're going to miss for a few more weeks but should eventually come back, Zach Moss is your guy. I think he's the perfect fill-in running back for you until one of your studs comes back. And then if JT isn't playing, you have a flex every single week. Next is another guy who's highly owned. It's Roschon Johnson at 50%. 4 attempts, 32 yards, 2 receptions. But the most important part to me is, sure, that Bears team looks like a mess. So maybe you go, I'm okay. But I think the guy has some talent. I like Khalil Herbert, who's in front of him as the starter right now. The Bears just completely healthy scratched Deonta Foreman in Week 3, or for Week 2. So, Roschon Johnson was the number 2 running back. Now, like I said, the touches could be limited, as Khalil Herbert hasn't really done that much on limited touches and just playing from behind with the Bears. But a guy that's, I think, a good handcuff and could be a good player if he gets the starting job, Roschon Johnson might be worth a pickup in your league. And then lastly, let's talk about 2 guys quickly. If you're looking for another Saquon Barkley kind of replacement guy, it's Matt Breida, 2% owned. This might not be an awesome pickup because that team kind of seems like a crapshoot. I mean, they haven't been great. They had that big comeback against the Cardinals, but a team that made the playoffs last year, should they even have been down 21 points into the second half? Probably not. And Saquon Barkley, for as awesome as a player as he is, he hasn't been doing balling out. He had a good last week, but his yards per carry has been down, and I don't blame him at all. I think he's awesome, but that Giants team just kind of seems like they're falling apart. But Matt Breida could be a nice fill-in for a couple weeks until Saquon comes back, or if you have other injuries other places, Matt Breida could be a solid fill-in for that. And the last player is Tajay Spears, last running back I want to talk about, 25% owned. He got 8 carries in that last game. I know it went to overtime, but this is just one of those pure handcuffs where I go, man, Derrick Henry, who has had some injury concerns the last 2 seasons, nothing major, but he's hitting that threshold where he's 29 years old. He's over almost 2,000 career touches. That's when guys start to break down. We have a whole laundry list of guys like Zeke Elliott, who's washed, Le'Veon Bell, all these guys. I can go through a whole list. If Tajay Spears does get that job and a team that's competing for a playoff spot in the Tennessee Titans, I think he could be a league-winning player where you got him off the waiver wire. So if you have somebody on your bench that you went, all right, I'm willing to cut bait now. It's over. We're good here. Like I whiffed on my last round pick and Tajay Spears is still available. Pick him up because I think he might not be a fill-in player that you could really use week by week. But if Derrick Henry goes down, you have a lottery ticket in Tajay Spears. Next on the list is receivers. Now, let's talk about Josh Reynolds. He's 20% owned, and he's been pretty solid so far this season. In his 2 games, he's had 80 and 66 yards, 2 touchdowns that last game. And I think this comes down to, Detroit wants to throw. They like running the ball, but they have to throw a lot, and that's kind of what they do, right? Jared Goff is one of the top 5, I believe, pass attempts in the NFL. So they want to throw. And so far, they've proven that they have no outside receiver outside of Josh Reynolds. It's been, Amon-Ra in the middle and Josh Reynolds on the outside as a big play threat. So, if we're going to get a guy who's going to throw a lot and is going to be targeted like Josh Reynolds, only 20% owned in an offense that likes to throw, I think Josh Reynolds could be worth the pickup flyer. Maybe he fades out, but maybe he doesn't. Maybe he sticks around as this downfield threat that is valuable, week in and week out. Next is Jacoby Myers. This guy is really highly owned. He's at 69% owned basically, but this offense needs Myers. The Vegas Raiders were a terrible offense in week 2. That was terrible. Only one receiver outside of Devontae Adams caught a pass, and that was Hunter Renfrow, who caught 1. The rest were tight ends, and even Josh Jacobs, who finished with, I think, negative rushing yards. He might have got positive, but he was a negative at one point, finished with 5 catches for 51 yards. He was their second leading receiver as the running back. So I think this offense needs Jacoby Myers. They need someone who could be in the middle of the field. That's a pretty good weapon there, and I think that should be Jacoby Myers. I'm hoping people forget about him. After their week 1 blow up, he had the concussion for week 2, so didn't play. But if Jacoby Myers is there on your waiver wire, I'm in. I really think he could be a valuable weapon season long. So I would look to pick him up if you have the ability to with Jacoby Myers. Next, I think is the number 1 receiver that I'd be targeting. I don't know why I waited till 3rd to talk about him, but it's Nico Collins. Nico Collins has been a pretty, he's been one of those guys that year after year we go, man, maybe Nico Collins could be that receiver 1. But he's had Davis Mills and he just hasn't really had the, offensive cast around him to support him. But now, Nico Collins, 55% owned. Currently, he's the wide receiver 6 in PPR leagues. Now we're 2 weeks in, but he's the wide receiver 6 in PPR leagues. In the past 2 games, he's had 20 total targets, 13 receptions, 226 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. He's top 5, top 10 in every one of those categories I just named. The Texans are probably going to be throwing a lot as they're playing from behind. They're another team that's probably not so great. And as someone who loves Dameon Pierce, they have not been able to run the ball at all. The offensive line's been brutal. So with CJ Stroud under center, who I think is going to be legit good in the league, he's thrown 91 pass attempts. That's the 3rd most in the entire NFL. So if they're going to play from behind, and if Nico Collins is going to be the number 1 receiver there, he seems like he's talented enough to get the job done and be a week in, week out, kind of just, hey, wide receiver 3 flex, if not even better for your team, then I'm in. I like Nico Collins. He'd be my number 1 waiver ad for receivers this week for sure over any of the other guys I'm going to name. And the last receiver I want to talk about is Tutu Atwell, 31% owned. Now you might be saying, why would you not want to add him over Nico Collins? And it's simply for the fact that Cooper Kupp's going to come back eventually. And who does it hurt more? Puka Nacua or Tutu Atwell? It's a hard kind of discrepancy to figure out. Matthew Stafford has the 2nd most pass attempts and the 3rd most yards in the NFL this season. So they're throwing, baby. They're throwing a lot. Everyone wants Puka Nacua, right? Everyone thinks he's awesome, which he is. I can't deny that. But Atwell is kind of falling under the radar as not being good, but or really being under, slept on, I guess you'd say. But in his 2 games, Atwell has 8 and 9 targets, 6 and 7 receptions, 119 yards, 79 yards. And I believe he scored. So Tutu Atwell has just been, actually he has not scored, I lied. But Tutu Atwell has been very useful for fantasy leagues, especially in a PPR league. That's 15 points in both games. That's hard to come by. I've seen a lot of players who are really great. A.J. Brown hasn't even done that yet. So Tutu Atwell is someone who's only 31% owned, is, I guess you could say, the second receiver in that offense. But if you're getting 8 and 9 targets when Stafford's throwing, I want him. I want a piece of that offense. So Tutu Atwell to me would be probably the second receiver I'd want to own if you're in a tight squeeze. I do like Jacoby Myers, but I think if you can get any one of these guys, I would really try to target Nico Collins first, and then maybe Tutu Atwell to win you some games early in the season. And we'll see if Cooper Kupp comes back in week 5. All right, and then quickly, let's talk about tight ends, because tight ends suck. They are terrible this year. They had a better bounce back week 2, as kind of the entire NFL did. But Jake Ferguson, 28% owned. He gets end zone targets. I think he only had 11 yards last game or week 2, but he gets red zone targets. He caught a touchdown this past week. He almost had another touchdown where he was open, but Dak overthrew him. So if you're just going to get me a guy that is a red zone threat on a Cowboys offense that's really been prone to throwing to tight ends in the past, okay, I'll take it. There's going to be duds. There's going to be the week where Jake Ferguson gets you 3 catches for 15 and you go, oh, no touchdown came. That sucks. So if that's not really a guy you want to target, the I would say feast or famine touchdown or bust guy, I think Zach Ertz is just another tight end who's awesome. He's 16% owned. He's second in the NFL in receptions by tight ends. He's 7th in yards, but first in targets out of tight ends. I mean, I know it's Josh Dobbs. It might turn to Clayton Tune, but Zach Ertz has just proven to be a reliable tight end that they trust and they want to go to. So at this point, I like Zach Ertz. I picked him up on a lot of teams. I started him in 2. I meant to start him in 1 other, but I forgot to sub him out. But Zach Ertz is just a really good player. He's proven it over all these years, coming off the torn ACL. I think he can give us one last good season from a tight end in this season with Josh Dobbs under center. And then quickly, let's talk about some streaming quarterbacks for week 3 rather. We do have Matthew Stafford, who's 31% owned. He plays Cincinnati, who's just kind of not been good this year. They've been really bad. So, and like I mentioned earlier, Stafford's had 93 pass attempts in 2 games. So the dude's almost averaging 50 pass attempts a game. That's second in the NFL. He hasn't thrown a lot of touchdowns yet, which is obviously an issue. Not great, but there's no reason he can't. We just saw him throw 2 seasons ago, like 40 touchdowns. So there's no reason Matthew Stafford can't throw touchdowns. And then the next guy is CJ Stroud. It's hard to trust a rookie, but in 2 games, I think he's legitimately looked really good. The guy's got touch. He just seems like he knows where to go with the ball. They're going to play from behind a lot, and I know that's not an awesome excuse, but if Houston is going to play from behind all season, that means Stroud's going to throw. And he has 2 less pass attempts than Stafford, where, he has 91 pass attempts. That's 45 pass attempts a game. He plays Jacksonville, who I think he can put up a lot of points, where the Texans are going to have to chase. And I don't really see the Jacksonville defense as someone that really scares me. I know they did pretty good against Mahomes last week, but I think, Kansas City isn't what they used to be anyway. But if CJ Stroud has to throw a lot and throw another 40 pass attempts, that's just the quarterback I want. I think he has a good rapport with Nico Collins and has decent weapons to where there's no reason he can't throw 2 touchdowns and throw for 300 yards. I think CJ Stroud's pretty good, so that's a quarterback I'll definitely be targeting for week 3 waivers and streaming. All right, I know I just talked a lot, but those are my week 3 waiver wire guys. I think it's a good group. I think week 1 definitely had more season-long talent, but, out of my week 3 waiver guys, I really think Kyren Williams could be a really great, just season-long option for you, where if he's still available, you got to pick him up. You have to do whatever you can to get that guy in your roster. And same thing with Jacoby Myers and Nico Collins. I think those are great season-long, upside guys to where, like I said, Nico Collins right now is the wide receiver 6 in PPR leagues. We're 2 weeks in, but has a lot of upside with CJ Stroud throwing on the ball. I like it a lot. And then the tight ends, they suck. But Zach Ertz has been really good so far. And I think he could be just a reliable, guy where if you're in a PPR league, he's a reliable maybe, 7 to 10 points a week. Probably not too much more. Where Jake Ferguson probably has a little bit higher upside because the guy's just been peppered in the, the end zone, red zone. But he has a little bit more variance. So if you like the video, leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel. There's going to be a waiver video coming every week, hopefully every Monday or Tuesday. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, you come back, turn the notifications on, and I will see you guys next time. Good luck in week 4. See you next week.